A California woman apologized after she was photographed at a recent anti stay at home protest holding a sign that made an unfortunate comparison. So now this was in rural Northern California, which kind of explains things. Oh, what are you talking about? Like California, you think is full of libs? No, no. There are rural parts of California that are incredibly conservative. So understand that. There are conservatives in every state. Now, they're just outnumbered by LA and San Francisco and the bigger cities. So now, this happened on May 16th. And of course, people have been covering these anti stay at home protests. They've been pretty big news. And so one of the pictures that came out was actually this. So if you couldn't read that, it says, "Muzzles are for dogs and slaves. I am a free human being." In fact, let me pull up the other one here. That's a better picture of that. Classy, guys, gals. Now, these were taken by Redheaded Black Belt, which was a local blog. So all credit to them for taking these pictures of the protests. And the person on the sign, you notice it was a African-American woman, or I'm sorry, an African woman that was muzzled. Now, that woman is Escrava Anastasia, and she was enslaved in Brazil in the 19th century. I accidentally called her African-American. She's actually African. So that's horrible, right? No one should be muzzled. And I don't understand why they said, oh, no, muzzles are for dogs and slaves. No, they're not. They're not for either. Let's be honest with you. Like, no, nobody should be muzzled. That's just horrifying. So to make that comparison is pretty awful. And to use that woman's picture to make your stupid point, deeply offensive. Just deeply offensive. So what point is she trying to make? Well, she told Redheaded Black Belt that she came out to stand with people who were deeply concerned about the stay-at-home orders and their repercussions. So now, look, I understand that people are hurting as a result of the virus economically. Yeah, that's why I wish the government would actually do their job and work for us and do what's necessary to support people while we set up testing, contact tracing, and, quarantine those who are actually sick with the virus, right? Until they're not contagious anymore. Then they go out of quarantine. Then we start to open up. The whole purpose of this is to open up in a way that is safe for everybody. By doing these protests, we're actually getting set back and getting set up for a potentially deadlier, much deadlier second wave. So if we did what we were supposed to do, instead of waste all of that time, yes, we could have already begun opening up like some of the other countries that have successfully done this. Well, but we're not. And the protests are actually making it worse. So there's another protester that was photographed holding this sign. She said, it's the first time ever coming to a demonstration and that this is what it took to get her out of the house at the age of 37. Oh, this is what it took. Not rampant homelessness, not the massive theft from the working class, top 1%, not the corruption in our government, not the assault on women's rights all over by state governments, not the massive spying that both the Bush, Obama, and Trump administrations have done. They've engaged in none of that. No, that's not what brought you out. But not being able to go out and get a haircut. That's what tipped you off. That's what sent you over the edge. Come on, man. Really? You got to be kidding me. Now, the pictures drew outrage, of course. One person said, I would love to say that I'm shocked by this woman's actions in my hometown, but I'm not. Another said, I hope this woman and the other woman pictured holding the sign get fired and have to face the consequences of their actions. Another says, tonight I will light a candle for Escrava Anastasia to try to choke back my rage. The hideousness of racism is displayed by these women. wrote another. May St. Anastasia's name live forever, and theirs turn to dust in our mouths. Now, one of the women had apologized for this and said, hey, look, this wasn't my sign. Quote, holding that sign up the lockdown protest was a grave mistake, and I ask forgiveness from all those who I have caused pain, as I had no sign of my own. It was handed to me by another protester, and a photographer took the picture before I considered the racist implications. She added, my intent was to take a stand for the freedom of all human persons, and I mistakenly held a sign that conveyed the opposite. Please know that I respect the dignity of all people, and I sincerely regret any suffering it has caused. So I think she should apologize for endangering her community by showing up at that protest at all. Remember, these protesters come from all over the state. They gather, they don't socially distance, they don't wear masks. The majority of them, there are some that do, but then, they possibly transmit the virus to each other, and then they go home and spread it to the rest of their community. That's how the virus spreads. This entire situation, though, shows that there is another virus, and it's far more older and much more virulent. And that, of course, is the virus of racism. And look, I would argue that racism is behind part of the reason for these protests. I mean, you have the virus that's rampaging in big cities. They're hitting black and brown people disproportionately right now because the cities are hotspots. And look, let's be honest, New York has had a terrible response to this. And Andrew Cuomo, during this entire thing, has also used the situation to try to cut services. Not only, to do that, but also mistreating the homeless population in New York. So Andrew Cuomo, you have to understand, is garbage. Absolute trash. And he is part of the reason why New York is being slammed so hard. And yes, the effect is disproportionate against black and brown people. So now, to people who don't live in the cities, people who are in rural California, for example, well, they see this as one of those urban problems. It doesn't really affect us. It's not here. We don't have the virus here. So why can't we go back to work? Why don't we have to lock down? I'm not in the city. It doesn't affect me. Well, not yet. Look, this virus has hit the big cities first. But I got to tell you, no place is immune. And in reality, residents of small towns are more at risk. They often lack the infrastructure to weather a pandemic. And so if you have a community of several thousand and you've only got 20 to 50 hospital beds, and and that virus spreads very fast through your community, well, that's going to be a disaster. An absolute disaster. Once they open back up, look, once the bigger places, right, open back up, it's going to ravage those communities. And they don't, and these people that live there, they don't realize that the only reason they haven't been hit yet is because of social distancing. Most people are doing that. Most people are, they're following these guidelines. Most people are staying at home. And so once they are forced to open back up, this is going to be bad. Now, the sad thing is, we can't really do anything to see, to make sure that these people see reason. It's going to take the virus rampaging through the communities for people to get and to understand that this is not something to mess around with. I don't want that to happen. That's why I report on this all the time. That's why I'm talking nonstop. But this is what's going to happen, unfortunately. And if you don't want to take this seriously, well, I'm sorry, facts don't care about your feelings. The virus is not a joke. It's not a hoax. It's coming to your town whether you like it or not. And hell, it might already be there. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a patreon.com/TYTNation set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, You know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.